This morning, I want you to think for a moment or two about your family growing up, okay? Now, my family growing up was pretty traditional. My mom was pretty much a stay-at-home mom, and my dad worked. He worked for the Department of Agriculture. He was an engineer. And I had two brothers. My older brother, Paul, was 2 years older, and my younger brother, Mark, was 12 years younger. And people would often ask my mom, well, was Mark an accident? And she'd say, no, he was planned. He was just 8 years late. But I had a good family. You know, my parents, they supported us as kids. I always felt supported, and I felt loved. And they loved us as best as they could. I think got a lot of good. I received a lot of good from my family, but my parents. But they weren't perfect. So, a question for you. How many of you would say you grew up in a dysfunctional family? Oh, come on. How many of you have belly buttons? Yeah, all of us should be raising our hands because all of us were born of children of Adam. None of us, our parents were perfect. All of us, our parents made mistakes. They failed in different ways, and as a result, we didn't get everything that we needed from the parents, from our family of origin. We all got gaps, right? As a result. And so I want you to think about that. We're going to come back to that issue in a few moments, but as we think about our families growing up, we realize that we all got some good, but we all got some gaps left because we didn't get everything we needed necessarily from the families we grew up in. We're going to come back to that in a moment. But in our text today from 1 Thessalonians, Paul's going to use several roles and relationships within the family to illustrate how we make disciples. So as I read through this passage, I want you to notice the language he uses here and the different family relationships that he mentions as part of his picture. So we're reading from 1 Thessalonians chapter 2 this morning, verses 7 to 12. Just as a nursing mother cares for her children, so we cared for you. Because we loved you so much, we were delighted to share with you not only the gospel of God, but our lives as well. Surely you remember, brothers and sisters, our toil and hardship. We worked night and day in order to not be a burden to anyone while we preach the gospel of God to you. You are our witnesses, and so is God, of how holy, righteous, and blameless we were among you who believed. For you know that we dealt with each of you as a father deals with his own children, encouraging, comforting, and urging you to live lives worthy of God, who calls you into his kingdom and glory. So what are some of the family relationships that you see here? Just go ahead, tell me. Just what did you see? What did you hear? A little louder, somebody. Mother, okay, what else? Children, yep, he talks about children. What else? Brothers, sisters, yeah, that's all in there. And fathers, yeah, he talks about fathers. So he uses these terms, these concepts that we are somewhat familiar with in a family relationship to teach us about how to make disciples. And I want you to listen to this as we go through this, as we examine this text a little bit, both as a person who wants to make disciples and as a person who is a disciple. So we have to listen to it from both sides here. Okay? But we're going to see the principles that he lays out. Now, just in general, one of the main things we should see here is that relationships are essential for your spiritual growth. See, by using these examples of family relationships, Paul's reminding us that God designed us to be in relationship with other people. From the very beginning, God said, "It is not good for man to be alone." After 41 years of marriage, I can tell you that's very true. And I would say even that I've learned from observation that, put it very simply, I'm a better person having Kim around. And it's kind of like the Jack Nicholson quote from the movie, I think it's As Good as It Gets. You make me want to be a better man. That's just true. And Kim doesn't actually have to be present for that to be true in my life. She can leave little notes like this around the house that just say, "I love you. I'll miss you." I'll tell a little bit more about why in just a moment. The spiritual hermits are limited in their spiritual growth because we need human interaction. We need those relationships, people close enough to us. We need those relationships because it's through them that we begin to see ourselves for who we are, some of our gaps. We learn how to overcome our selfishness. We learn to live out God's command to love one another. See, real spiritual growth and life change happens in the context of real relationships. That's why as a church, one of our Trinity values, we've said, is we seek to build authentic community. Because we're believing that life change, healing, and growth occurs best within Christ-centered, healthy relationships, characterized by generosity, grace, and authenticity. See, we grow best in community. And this is why one of Satan's primary strategies to keep you and me from growing is to keep us in isolation, disconnected from real relationships. He makes us focus on our fears of getting hurt to keep us from risking being vulnerable in relationships. He keeps us busy with all kinds of stuff, whether it's work or even ministry. So we don't have time to actually get close to people. That's why you can be in a room like this with 270 other people and still be in isolation, where nobody really knows what's going on in your life. Nobody knows the real you. See, God designed the human family and its relationships to teach us some things, to teach us about relationships and to help us grow and develop. As children in our families, we learn to trust, to connect through the unconditional love from our parents. We learn about boundaries, about what I'm responsible for and what I'm not responsible for. We learn to forgive. We learn to live under authority. Sounds like your family growing up, right? Well, maybe not. Like I said, none of us had perfect parents. None of us had perfect families. None of us got all that we needed from our family of origin, and so we all ended up with gaps. So listen, this is important. So what did God do? God designed, He created the family of God to continue that work that our family of origin started. God designed the church, the family of God, and all the relationships within it to continue that work, to fill in the gaps, to continue our growth and development that was incomplete from our family of origin. Do you understand that? It's the context that Paul is speaking here. So in the church, in the family of God now, we have spiritual mothers and fathers, grandmothers and grandfathers, spiritual aunts and uncles, brothers and sisters, nieces and nephews. And God uses those relationships then to continue our spiritual growth. And that's why here in 1 Thessalonians, he uses these metaphors to remind us, to teach us about this. First sort of area to talk about here that he's saying that we all need spiritual parents in our lives. Talks here, he says in verses 7 and 8, and then about nursing mothers, and then 11 and 12, he talks about as a father. As a nursing mother cares for her children, so we cared for you. So let's talk about this. Think about how a good mother cares for her children. Okay? I know you moms, you can definitely answer this question. We can think about that. But all of us have mothers and understand what a good mother, could be. And we can even ask some of the children here a question or two. What do you, as kids, what do you know? What do you remember or think of a good mother? So kids, picture in your mind what a good mother does. And for you or for one of your brothers or sisters or something, but what does a good mother do?
Helps you when you need help.
They help you when you need help, okay? Like what kind of help?
Help on homework.
Homework, yeah?
Or help when you break a bone.
When you...
Help on homework or when you break a bone or get
When you get hurt, when you fall down and get hurt, they're there to help you, to fix you, fix the broken things that happen in life. Yeah. What else? They feed you. Yeah, they provide good food for you.
They give you love.
And they love you. Okay? Now, how about some others? What?
Take care of you.
They take care of you. Like what? Anything particular you think of?
By helping you with stuff.
Helping you with stuff? Do they get you dressed in the morning? Yeah. They help you pick out clothes, whatever. So as children understand these little things. So parents, what else? What are some other things? Mothers. What are the other kinds of things that a good mother does? Anything else come to mind here? What's that? They praise you. They encourage you. What else? They pray for you. They understand the spiritual component as well. What else?
They anticipate
They assess the needs of the family and
Fix it before anything.
they respond to those. They figure out what are the needs, and in particular children even, and those child's peculiarities, personality. What else? They discipline. Yeah. So all these things, a good mother. Another, what was that? They nurture them. Uh-huh. They feed. They provide good food.
My mom had a good point. They say no.
They say no. Hey, good to see you this morning. We go way back. So we have this idea and understanding of what a good mother does. And Paul draws on that. He uses that now to talk about how we do that in the church. How we do that for one another. And notice, Paul, this is not a gender issue for Paul. I mean, he's talking about himself here. He says, like a good mother, like a nursing mother, I cared for you. So this is not a gender issue. He's saying, as disciples, as spiritual parents, there are some things we have to do for others. And in particular, I mean, we could extend this picture a lot. He mentions a couple of things here. But he says that he had that same kind of love and care for those he discipled that a mother does for her children. He mentions a couple here. A nursing mother, as you mentioned, provides food, provides the right nutrition, a balanced diet for their children. It's not what the child wants, candy, but what the child needs. Paul says he shared the gospel with them, what they needed. He didn't just tell them what they wanted to hear. We talk about a mother caring for her children, loving, nurturing, protecting, desiring God's best for that child. A mother, as Paul points here, shares her life and even gives her life for her child. A mother is willing to sacrifice her wants, her needs for the sake of her child. Changes her life around the needs of her child. I mean, mothers, it's been a while, but remember that first year. You sacrifice sleep. You sacrifice. You change your life around the needs of that child. Why? And Paul says here, uses the same analogy because he says in essence, he says they've become dear to him. These young disciples that he had only known for a few weeks that he'd spent in Thessalonica, and yet he says they were dear to him. He cared for them. They were loved by him. Now, my wife Kim is not here this morning. Let me explain why. Some of you have heard. My son Matt and his wife, our daughter-in-law Carol, are out in San Francisco. And they have our first grandchild, Connor, 6 months old. And Carol's been preparing to go back to work. She works in the mayor's office in San Francisco. And she's been planning to get back there. And so they've been looking for childcare and working through details of all that. And they had they scouted places, gotten on the list, all that stuff, put in their deposit, and had picked a child care facility that was right near her work, but near Matt's as well. And she could go there to, during the day to nurse and, take care of different things. So last week, they went to, you have sort of a trial period. You can go for a day that Carol sat with Connor and the care workers and so forth for a day and kind of saw how it went and worked. And then Matt went for a day, the same thing, spent with them watching and seeing how things went and everything else, helping him to adjust. And after that, they came to the conclusion that this wasn't going to work. And so Wednesday, they called Kim. And they asked if, they basically took us up on an offer that we had made months ago, that if they needed, we would make the sacrifice, and she would come. So she's doing, we call it nanny. So we changed some plane flights, and she left Saturday to go out there. She's going to be there for 6 weeks. Why? Why? Think about that. Because a hired worker will never care for a child the way a mother or grandmother will. But that's what Paul is talking about here. That's what he's saying. And he's saying that all of us, in our spiritual growth, we need spiritual parents. We need mothers and fathers who care for us, provide for us, look out for us, do all the things that we're talking about here the way a good mother would. We need those people in our lives. And he's saying that as we mature in Christ, we need to be those kind of people for others. You see that? That's what he's talking about here. Now he goes on. He also uses the metaphor of a father here and mentions several things here about how a father deals with his own children, and some of these we kind of brought in as well. He says a father encourages and comforts and urges you, and we're not going to talk about those specifically today because I'm going to talk about those three qualities in the next 3 weeks. I want to dig a little deeper into that and what it means to be like a father in making disciples. Now, there's another kind of family relationship, though, here that Paul also talks about. And he points out that in making disciples, he shows us that we all need spiritual brothers and sisters in our lives as well. In 1 Thessalonians in chapter 2, verses 9 to 10, the middle section, he makes this reference. He says, "Surely you remember, brothers and sisters, our toil and hardship. We worked hard night and day in order to not be a burden to anyone." So Paul says, as in this idea as brothers and sisters, there's some things we need to learn as well. As good brothers and sisters, he says, we worked hard. night and day so as not to be a burden to you, not to be a burden to one another. We work hard ourselves so that we're not a burden to others. And what he's saying is that as brothers and sisters, there are people around us that we're not in dependent relationships. There's a difference. He says we work alongside each other. Brothers, they help each other, certainly. But they take personal responsibility for themselves. And we need people around us in those kinds of relationships as well. And Paul points out here in this brother-sister kinds of relationships, he says, and you are witnesses of how we lived among you. See, and then explains that a little bit. He says that you're witnesses how holy and righteous and blameless we were. You saw us, you saw our lives. And as brothers and sisters, serve as role models for us. They're examples for us of what to do and what not to do at times. Some of you may have had the experience like I did of having my older brother, and 2 years older, I could observe him, and sometimes I saw the mistakes that he made and some of the trouble he got into, and so I sort of learned what not to do. You kind of see some of those and go, okay, I don't think I'll try that. That's probably not headed in a good direction. But what Paul's talking about here as brothers and sisters in Christ is on the positive side. We need positive examples of godliness, of moral integrity, doing the right thing even when it's costly. And so Paul says, you know how we lived among you. You saw our example, that there's a brother and sister relationship. He says, we were together. This is life on life. You saw my life for what it was, for what it is. You know how we lived. You saw my way of life. And he said, there are people that you need to be close enough to in the family of God as brothers and sisters that you see the reality of Christ in their life. The people that you get to know and they get to know you. And you can't do that with everybody here. But perhaps in a small group, perhaps with a couple friends, brothers and sisters. The question is, who is there in your life who knows the real you? Who knows what's really going on? Who is there that you can open your heart to and they see all the stuff? People that you can see and say, you know, there's something in your life that I'd like to see. I'd like to understand. How do you do that? And there are people that get to really know you. And there's some of that brother and sister sorts of relationship. So what about you? As you think about these things this morning, who knows the real you? Who have you opened your heart to? See, the challenge here this morning, first of all, is who is there who can be that spiritual mother or father? Someone that you can trust to provide and care and all the elements we're going to talking about as a mother or father. Maybe it's just a small group leader or, somebody else that you know, someone you look up to and respect. And on the flip side, who is there that you can provide that care and all that's involved with that for them? Who is there that you can be that spiritual parent? Don't get hung up on the language here, please. Whatever, mother, father, coach, mentor, discipler. Don't let the language hang you up. But God calls us, as we mature, to be that kind of person for somebody else. And then who are the brothers and sisters in your life? That mutuality, co-laborers in a spiritual sense. People that you kind of lock arm in arm and say, hey, let's figure this out. Let's work together. All of us need all three of those kinds of relationships in our lives. So for you this morning, I want you to think about those and think, okay, who's missing? Maybe I have some of those kind of people in my life. Great. Who's missing and how do I get started? How do I find those kinds of connections?